You see these? Quaker oatmeal packets are just full of That's right, I said sugar, and there's no protein. You see this? Full of sugar too. We've got to step it up, boys, and harness that anabolic horsepower, just like my trusty steed, Cupcake. So it's time we make ourselves some sugar-free overnight oats packed with protein. Come get some, boys. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So some of you had viewed my vegan cookie dough recipe video that had a second part in that video related to overnight oats, and some of you had seen my recent Instagram stories related to how I use water flavor enhancers and approach such a traditional staple meal to my everyday diet. And now for those of you who hadn't seen that video, I'll go ahead and link the video in the top right hand corner. So if you guys are interested, go ahead and check that out. Now, in all honesty, I was never the biggest fan of overnight oats. The thought of cold oatmeal just absolutely turned me off. And I've always stuck with the traditional hot oatmeal or cream of wheat or cream of rice, along with some honey and some cinnamon. But over time, I realized I needed a more efficient way to meal prep my oats, and so I started experimenting. And eventually the thought of cold oats just was a thing of the past, because the endless opportunities for coming up with so many different flavors was just mind-numbingly awesome. Now, in the last few weeks, I got a number of requests from folks wanting to know how I actually meal prep, or just how I change things up when it comes to such a traditional and simple breakfast meal. So I figured we'd continue the overnight oats theme and show you a few different flavors that I use on a frequent basis. But I think today's flavors will definitely help to get you started and also give you some ideas for those of you who are wanting to switch things up or just absolutely try something new. So if you're ready to level up your oatmeal routine, sit back and let's get into it. So in terms of the equipment that you guys need, obviously you're gonna need a scale in order to measure out the ingredients, but on top of that, just grab yourself some type of jar. You can also use a bowl or a cup, either of those work. But today we're gonna actually use a Hermes clamp top jar. So in terms of the first ingredient, we're gonna go ahead and use 1 scoop or 32.5 grams of a whey protein isolate. Now, the one we're using today is actually the Cereal Splash by Transparent Labs. Feel free to go ahead and use a vanilla or a cinnamon-based whey protein isolate. They definitely go very well for the strawberry shortcake flavor that we're trying to go for. And then next up, we're gonna go ahead and use roughly 8 grams of a peanut butter powder. And then next up, we're gonna go ahead and use 40 grams of your traditional oatmeal. Next up, we'll go ahead and use 60 grams of almond milk. And then to top things off, we'll go ahead and use 1 or 2 strawberries. Next, we're gonna use 80 grams of a fat-free Greek yogurt. Now, with all of these ingredients, we're gonna go ahead and put everything into your jar, bowl, mason jar, what have you. But let's go ahead and start things off with putting some of these dry ingredients in first. So here we've got the 3 dry ingredients into the jar. We're gonna go ahead and give this a good mix just to make sure everything gets integrated very well in terms of overall flavor and really prevent any type of clumping. Right after this, we're gonna go ahead and start putting in our wet ingredients. And for those of you who are looking for something really sweet, obviously feel free to add your additional low-calorie sweeteners. Now, the last step of this process is using a water flavor enhancer. We're gonna go ahead and use a strawberry watermelon flavor. I picked this up at Aldi for about $1.75 or so, and it usually lasts me about a month, a little over. So now that we've got the water flavor enhancer, the Greek yogurt, the almond milk, all in here in terms of wet ingredients, we're gonna go ahead and give this a good mix because you wanna make sure that all of this is integrated nicely so that way when it sits overnight, or if you have it sit for at least a few hours, that all of the flavors are just gonna mesh in very nicely and very evenly. So one thing to also note is that it might look a little dry, and if it's looking a little too dry for your liking, obviously feel free to add in a little bit more almond milk. But I will say, once you let this sit overnight or for a few hours, the texture is just gonna smoothen and loosen up a little bit. So just make sure to keep that in mind. All right, guys, we're rocking and rolling into recipe number 2, and this is gonna be a maple mocha overnight oats flavor. Now, if you guys huge fans of coffee flavor or espressos like I am, you're gonna love this one. This is absolutely amazing. Now, just as a heads up, guys, if you make this and then immediately eat it afterwards, it's probably gonna be very bitter. So I highly recommend you guys to let it sit for at least a few hours. Now to kick this flavor off, we're gonna go ahead and use 1 scoop of the cereal splashed by Transparent Labs. Then next up, we'll go ahead and use 60 grams of a sugar-free maple syrup. Then we're gonna go ahead and use approximately 70 grams of an unsweetened almond milk or of regular almond milk. Next up, we'll go ahead and use 80 grams of a fat-free Greek yogurt. And then next up, we'll go ahead and use 40 grams of your old-fashioned oatmeal. And for all of you coffee lovers, we're gonna go ahead and use just a splash of instant coffee. Now, for those of you who are actually really deep into coffee, feel free to use a little bit of espresso, but for this case, we're gonna go ahead and use just a splash of instant coffee. All right, so similar to what we did for the last recipe, we're gonna go ahead and take all of the dry ingredients and place it into our jar. So guys, just as a heads up, when it comes to the instant coffee or if you're using espresso, the flavor is really just going to depend on how much you actually enjoy the flavor. So in terms of the amount, we're using less than a half a teaspoon of this because a little goes a long way, especially when you let this sit overnight. So now that we've got all the dry ingredients in the jar, we're gonna go ahead and give this a good mix, very similar to what we had done for the classic strawberry shortcake. Now in terms of the maple mocha flavor, you can go ahead and add in a little bit of cinnamon. It really just kind of adds a little additional dimension to the overall flavor. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a few spanks. So we got all the dry ingredients in here. We're just gonna go ahead and give this a good mix just to make sure everything is integrated nicely when it comes to overall flavor, making sure that we can really prevent any type of clumps from forming. Now we're gonna go ahead and add in our first wet ingredient. So now we've got all the ingredients in here. We just topped this off with 60 grams of almond milk, but take a look at that color. I mean, that is a beautiful making of some maple mocha overnight oats. I can tell you, oh man, this is smelling really good. I can smell the coffee and the maple. Oh, it smells delicious. But we're gonna go ahead and give this a good mix, very similar to what we did for the strawberry shortcake, and then let it sit in the fridge for 3 to 4 hours or overnight. So for flavor number 3, we're gonna take on a classic orange creamsicle. I don't know how many of you guys remember this, but this is a good mix of vanilla and a touch of orange. So we're gonna go ahead and take a look at a few ingredients, so let's hop into it. So first up, in terms of dry ingredients, we're gonna go ahead and use 1 scoop of the French vanilla whey protein isolate by Transparent Labs. And then next up, we'll go ahead and use 40 grams of an old-fashioned oatmeal. So let's go ahead and put our dry ingredients in first, starting with 40 grams of oats. Then we've got to make this more anabolic, so let's go ahead and do 1 scoop of a French vanilla. Now that's going to do it for the dry ingredients, so we're just going to go ahead and give this a good mix. Very similar to what we've been doing for the last 2 other recipes, making sure that we're not leaving any opportunity for any clumps to form. So first up, in terms of wet ingredients, we're gonna hit this with 80 grams of Greek yogurt. Then we're gonna go ahead and give this a good kick of vanilla extract. Next, we'll go ahead and use approximately 60 grams of an almond milk. And then we'll go ahead and hit this with a light set of whipped cream. And then lastly, we're gonna go ahead and use a touch of orange by using the water flavor enhancer. Guys, just as a reminder, a little goes a long way. So to wrap this recipe up, guys, we're gonna go ahead and give this a good mix, very similar to what we did in the last 2 recipes. Whole point of this is just really make sure that all of the flavors marinate together. Here we are with the 3 different overnight oats recipes. Now guys, I'm not gonna go through the normal rating scale for these recipes just because these are ones that I've done for myself in the past, and hopefully these are ones that maybe might spark some interest or some ideas for yourself when it comes to creating some new approaches to oatmeal. So in terms of the total calories and macros, we'll take a look at our very first recipe, which was the classic shortcake recipe. Now in terms of total calories, we are looking at 339 total calories with 3.5 grams of fat, 45 grams of protein, and 32 grams of carbs. Then next up, we've got the maple mocha. And in terms of total calories, we've got 329 total calories, 3.7 grams of fat, 43 grams of protein, and 31 grams of carbs. And then lastly, we've got the orange creamsicle, which is 325 total calories, 3.7 grams of fat, 41 grams of protein, and 32 grams of carbs. So for me, in terms of total calories and macro breakdown, I absolutely love the way that these are broken down in terms of overall fat and protein ratios. For me, roughly 40 grams of protein in the morning, especially after I've come back from a workout, just absolutely works perfect for me. And so for those of you who are looking to add a little bit more protein or maybe even take out some protein, these are extremely flexible in terms of how you want to make it to your own nutrient breakdown. Well guys, thanks for tuning in for your daily dose of anabolic goodness. I hope these 3 recipes give you guys some inspiration or some ideas on how to level up such a simple meal. I'd love to hear how you guys take these oatmeal recipes and make them your own, or if you have new ideas or new creations, share them in the comments below, because I know a lot of folks would love to see some of these ideas. But otherwise guys, we've got a video here or here. Make sure to watch it and stay tuned for some good times. Now if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. But otherwise guys, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Pew, pew, pew. Had to throw that in there. Stay safe, stay swole, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.